All right, folks, it is 6 o'clock. It is Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. We're in the council chambers of the city of Platteville, and I will call this regularly scheduled meeting to order. Colette will start with roll call.
Todd Casper,
Here.
Barbara Doss,
Here.
Bob Gates,
Here.
Ken Killian,
Here.
Tom Nall,
Here.
Lynn Parrott,
Here.
Kathy Cobb.
Here.
Okay, the first item on our agenda tonight is the consideration of the consent agenda. The following items may be approved on a single motion due to their routine nature. If you want discussion on any of these, please let me know. Council minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting of September 24th, the payment of bills, financial reports for the month of September, appointments to boards and commissions, and I sent all of you this afternoon. I have 4 tonight: Gary Lindahl to the Community Safe Routes Commission, Keisha King to the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Committee, and Bob Stoffaker to the RDA to serve through 7/1/2027, and Mark Ime to serve through 7/1, I think it's 2026. I'd have to go, but it was in the document I sent earlier. So those 4 appointments. Licenses, there was 1 and 2 year operator licenses to serve and sell alcohol, as in your packet. Permits, we have a street closing permit for Platteville's Main Street Sweet Treats program, which is on Saturday, October 26th. They do that at 10:30 in the morning to 1:30 in the afternoon on that Saturday. I believe that's also, is that the Saturday night we have trick or treat too? No, we don't. That's later.
Halloween.
It's on Halloween, okay. And then we have the run walk for the Platteville Community Arboretum's annual Monster Dash, the 5K on Saturday, October 19th, starting at 10 a.m. So those are the consent agenda items. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, a motion by Ken and a second by Bob. Colette will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nall,
Yes.
Parrott,
Yes.
Cobb.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, next on our agenda are citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. I know that Dan has turned a green sheet into Colette, so I'm asking Dan Dreesens to come to the podium to talk to us about a grant we received, I think 4 years ago. Maybe it was 5 years ago.
3 years ago. So Dan Dressens, 915 West Main Street, Delta 3 Engineering. Yeah, so for the stream bank project, yeah, we did receive the grant 3 years ago. We requested a couple extensions for that. The contractor, Rural Construction, will be starting. They were intended to be starting yesterday or today, but they are working on a project in Dodgeville where they had some emergency water main breaks. So they're there finishing those up this week. And so they'll be starting at the East Mineral Street Bridge next week. So that portion of the trail will be closed down first. They're anticipating that work there to take a little bit more than a week, only because there's not actually a week's worth of work there because we have to pour some concrete underneath the bridge. So the area between the bridge abutment that separates the the channel from the actual bike path, that area is going to be infilled with concrete, as well as some of the area between the east side abutment and the sidewalk, because it just basically every time it floods, fills up full of mud. This will make it easier to maintain. We can't prevent the mud from coming in there, but the concrete will make it easy. So that trail section will be closed probably for 1 to 2 weeks, just because it's going to take some time for them to cure. Otherwise, the remainder of the work of there is going to basically replacing some of the riprap that used to be there from the back in the day, and replacing that and kind of grading back to stream bank. While that area is finishing up, they'll be moving over to Valley Road. We did some of that work back in 2000. Valley Road was 9 or 11, 2011. And we had a slope failure there. A few years ago, the city street department dumped a bunch of riprap along from the top of the bank, along Valley Road down to the stream. The DNR did not like that. So we're going to take that riprap out, put that riprap, try to reuse as much as possible along the base of the stream, and then regrade it. One of the things that we do have to do with all the riprap is with the new rules along the stream banks is that we have to cover it back up with topsoil and try to seed it. Don't know how long that's going to last, but that is the new recommendation to make it look nicer. So we've been working with the DNR on that on not just this project, but multiple projects. The last area that will be completed will be over by the pedestrian bridge crossing by by Country Kitchen, excuse me. We'll be resetting some of the riprap that's underneath that pedestrian bridge and that fishing pier, as well as doing some stream bank grading there too. During that time frame, that portion of the trail will be closed as well. The nice thing about that is once the work is completed, which should only take a few days, that stream bank will, that trail will be reopened up. So everything should be completed here in the next few weeks. And the contractor is going to be putting a little bit extra annual ryegrass in with it to get some growth, so we can stabilize the banks a little bit before the winter. So that's there the entire winter.
So Dan, my recollection was that no work could be done after October 15th.
That was a Dan implied or imposed
That
deadline.
was what?
A Dan Dressen's implied or imposed deadline. We are doing all work above the ordinary high water mark. So therefore, the restriction of October 15th does not pertain. So,
Okay.
so that's why we've been able to work with the contractor a little bit on some of their projects and get them in here. So.
Okay. And Howard, DNR was here today. Did you address this with Cheryl when she was here? Okay. Just asking.
The Mineral Street, the one you talked about at first.
Yes.
I'm just trying to vision that. That's not gonna, will that impede traffic at all?
No,
Yes.
no, everything is going to be down underneath the
I'm
bridge.
thinking of the one that's right by the dog park.
By the dog park, yes. Yep, so
Okay.
all of our work is gonna actually be down underneath the bridge itself.
Okay.
Yep,
Oh,
so,
mhm.
And have you walked
Mhm.
under that?
No, don't ever plan on.
Okay.
No, I'm just,
Well, you actually walk under the.
I have, yeah, no, I have.
Any other questions? Okay,
thank you.
thank you. All right, we'll go on to the reports in our packet. Reports, Airport Commission, Bob.
Nothing to add,
Community Safe Routes, Tom.
nothing to add.
Parks, Recreation and Forestry, Bob.
Nothing to add for that, for the
Aquatic.
aquatic center, the deadline for well, should I go on to that?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're together.
The deadline for the survey is the 13th, but as of today, we have 1,359 responses. So I think that's a pretty good turnout. And then we'll analyze the data more on the 13th. Guess one other thing I would like to say, and specifically to Ken, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my cool the last meeting when we were talking about the CIP budget and then specifically the aquatic center. And I should have been more thoughtful about my responses to your questions because I know you're just doing your job.
Hey.
I have a question about 3A, Platteville Aquatic Recreation Subcommittee. So I'm looking at the page and it's about item 4, land parcels update. So it says Joe, Carol, Clint, Bob Lowe. They examined land parcels available for a community pool. Properties include the former Clara property, Mountain View Park, and a citizen called me a few days ago and was in favor of using Mountain View Park, the soccer park, and UWP Miners Field. We will discuss the sites in more detail at the next meeting. So to whom do I direct my question as to the next meeting and whether a site has been selected?
Well, we have had that next meeting and we looked at the contours of all of the sites and looked at the location of each site within the city of Platteville. And at this point, we've are looking at the current site, the site that the pool has been at as the location for the new pool.
But as I recall, you were to get information on how deep down it goes as far as,
Right.
the location.
These minutes are from 2 meetings ago.
Okay,
That's the way they
So-
always are. And we've had a meeting since then.
well, okay, now my question is there money being spent to get information on how deep down you can go for examination? Is that,
Ken, I think that was the reason we had a budget amendment last time on the CIP.
And
Because
what-
there had been no money allocated. And then we redirected $235,000 or thereabouts from another project to be for the swimming pool project so that we could do exactly what you are asking.
Bob has actually been in contact with some geotechnical engineers. And they've given him an estimate for putting 8 borings into the existing site going down 25 feet. And
it may go deeper than that.
according to these engineers, that is deep enough for this type of facility. 25 feet is deep enough for
But-
a swimming
but
pool.
The thing is that as far as limestone, you can have depths greater than that. So how are you going to take care of that as far as holding up the pool?
That might be a question for the engineers, but they know what's there. They're going to do the borings. And they've said they think that's adequate. We can also go deeper at the cost of $20 per foot. And according to their estimate, we could still have $1,000 to spend to go deeper and stay under the CIP cap of $10,000.
So basically right now, the money is going for the purpose of trying to find out how deep you can go.
But the money is going for them to explore what is 25 feet or more below the surface. And Bob asked them if they thought that was adequate, and they said yes.
If you go down 25 feet and you find that there's a location down there that is open.
Mhm.
So what are you gonna do?
We may
Pour
have to
concrete
readjust our
into it?
plans, but that's why we're doing the exploration.
You gonna pour concrete into it?
I don't know, Ken. Going to have to readjust the plans, and that's what engineers are
I'm
going to
just
be hired for.
I'm trying to look at what's going on here. Okay,
Okay, Housing Authority Board is the next one, and I'm on the Housing Authority Board, and we are currently recruiting or preparing to recruit for a new executive director. Our executive director will leave as of October 17th. And so we have an interim plan with a couple of area housing authorities to help us through a time period and help us to get to recruitment. So that's been a lot of time.
you wanna get a new director for the housing?
Right, because Jen has moved, yes, Jen has resigned,
She has resigned.
effective October 17th.
Oh, I didn't read, did I miss that in my reading?
I don't know. I didn't, yeah, it might not have been in those minutes since we've probably had 2
I
additional meetings since
I
then.
read those things.
Yeah. So it was probably, she did not resign on August 27th. She resigned about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, is this, but she's not really a Platteville city employee.
She is not an employee of the city. She is an employee of the Housing Authority Board. Okay.
Originally, that was set up with, Eastlick, but she was a city employee. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other reports in your packet were the water and sewer financial report, the airport financial report, and department progress reports. Any questions?
I
Tom?
want to say that for the museum, I have to give credit to Cody. he did a really nice job in setting up a 5-year plan. And I think we were all impressed, board members. So thank you very much, Cody.
Thank you.
I understand you also sold a record number of pasties.
We did a pretty good job this time around. It wasn't record number. We did better than we did in the spring. But I think the weather is kind of in our favor for that.
Good. I heard the number 1,200 being batted around,
Yes.
so, okay. Other questions or comments on, board reports or your reports in your packet?
I do. I'm gonna tag Howard. And thank you for the in-depth report on the streets and the trails.
Okay,
That
thank
putting
you.
that information together is, puts all of that right in our face. So, as challenging as it looks, I appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a comment. When does it come up as far as public library?
Well, if you, the report was in the packet, so if you have a question on the library, what was in the packet?
Are we to it yet?
Sure. Anything in the department progress reports?
Well, I have here the, oh yeah, here's progress report. Oh, I have a question, and more than one. I worked with Charlie Chamberlain for a number of years on projects around our property and so forth. And it says here that his employment ended on Wednesday, August 14th. And my question is, why was he terminated? Is this secret?
If you'd like to have that conversation, it'd be more appropriate to probably put a closed session on to talk about details of employment, as that right would be extended to our employees.
Because there are lots of questions in here about what's going on. I mean, I've read the employee handbook about 3 times, and people can be terminated without cause. Nothing has to be said at.
That's correct. We are an at-will employee for our general employees.
Pardon?
We are an at-will employer for our general employees. That is correct.
So I have various questions on that one. I mean, I'm not questioning about the other one is when they have termination, but that one stands out. Okay, thank you. We're gonna hold a meeting on that sometime?
If you want to talk about it, Ken, you'll need to make an appointment with Clint.
With the city manager,
That's right.
okay?
Okay,
Thank
any other questions on the department progress reports?
Well, I
If-
thought there was a good write-up here as far as supplemental information for Common Council street infrastructure. So that, I appreciated that one. Let's see what else is there. I guess that's it for now.
Okay, then let's move into the action portion of our agenda. Tonight, the first action item is audit services for the year ending December 31, 2024. Nicola.
Thank you. Johnson Block and Company has been the city's auditor for many years and has provided various kinds of audits for the city. Typically, annually, they will perform the financial audit. Recently, they have also been performing a single audit every year that's to comply with Title II of the Uniform Guidance and the state's single audit guidelines. And they have just finished completing the single audit for 2023. And as you'll remember, Johnson Block was engaged to assist the city with the submission of the conventional water rate case back in 2021, which was a very large undertaking. We, city staff, would like to engage with Johnson Block for the 2024 financial audit and single audit. There's been various new GASB statements that we have to comply with, and we have a new accounting and finance manager. And it would be preferable to allow him to go through an audit with an auditor that is familiar with our systems and books before contemplating a possible switch to a new auditor. So staff are recommending that we approve engaging with Johnson Block for auditing services for the year ending December 31st, 2024.
Okay, questions on this audit request and then subsequent engagement of Johnson Block? So do I understand that the total expected expenditure is what, 65,000?
Yeah, I can scroll down to that page of the engagement letter. The 65,000 would include, yes, the water and sewer utility and also the TIF districts.
And this would then be billed, this is for next year, so then this number would be carried forward into budget planning.
Yes, it is in the 2025 budget.
Other questions?
Gonna look for a new,
We're gonna put out an RFP and see who would respond.
That would be our intent in
new
2025.
company.
Or it might be the same one, who knows?
It's possible.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I want to make a motion.
Okay,
I move to approve engaging with Johnson Block for auditing services for the year ending December 31st, 2024.
Second.
okay, we have a motion by Lynn and a second by Kathy to engage Johnson Block for our audit for this, as this year ends, December 31, 2024. Colette will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Null,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next action item on our agenda is Resolution 2414, authorizing the issuance and sale of $5.975 million in general obligation promissory notes, Series 2024B. Nicola.
Thank you.
And
And Kayla Thorpe with Ellis, who is
look
joining
at your screens that
remotely.
we have someone who has joined us.
Yes, so this is Kayla Thorpe. You've seen and met Kayla before. And she is going to walk us through the sale day report that I put on your desk. But just as way of, in way of introduction, as you remember, the 2024 CIP budget included various projects that were going to be funded through the issuance of general obligation notes. The Soden and Grace Street reconstruction project, the West Adams Street reconstruction project, the North Court Street reconstruction project, the Lewis Street concrete pad, a 2.5-ton dump truck, snow blower, and the fire facility. And the total funding amount that we were looking for was $5,874,628 to be included with the cost of issuance of debt. So the total amount was $5,975,000. And today was the day of the notes being offered for sale. And Kayla is going to walk us through the sale day report and what happened this morning.
Yes, thank you, Nicola. I'm going to share my screen for those of you that don't be able to see it. It's the same sale day report that is in front of you today. We had a very successful sale of the city's notes this morning. We received 7 total bids, and we opened bids this morning. As you might remember back from when we were, or Brian was there setting the sale, we used a planning interest rate of about 4.06%. I'm happy to report that the winning low interest rate bid came in at 3.66%, so significantly lower than what our original planning estimate was. And then there was also a reoffering premium along with that that was able to downsize the note in a total amount of about $75,000. And so over the life of the note, that will save the city principal and interest payments and about $36,000 over the life of the note. Nicola covered the projects that this note will be paying for. So I'm not going to go through those. I will say that we had a rating call with S&P. I think it was a week and a half ago, and I'm proud to report that S&P affirmed the city's credit rating. And so that was a very positive number and influence to have as we went to sale day today. Included in your packet are the bid tabulations that outline each bid that came in and kind of what the coupon rates and what the true interest rates are. The things you want to focus on are the true interest rate and of that winning bid from Piper Sandler, which is 3.66%. So as you can see here, we were downsizing the issuance of the notes by $75,000, and the underwriter's premium that was received on each of them actually will allow the city to pay the first 2025 and 2026 interest payments without having to levy for those payments. So it will be able to reduce the debt service tax levy beyond what we were planning. So that's a very significant impact to the city as we move forward in repaying these bonds. We've updated the allocation, and those red numbers you see there, that is the premium deposited to the debt service accounts for each of those specific portions that will pay the 2025 and 2026 interest payments for those. So basically, the winning bidder is paying those interest payments on your behalf because they gave a premium to the city in this bid.
Kayla, can I just ask a question real quick?
Yes.
If I'm reading the table correctly, the second year in 2026, the premium will pay a portion, but not all of the debt service on these notes. Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct. Excuse
Thank
me.
you.
Yeah, there'll be about a $204,000 payment, primarily revolving around the fire station's interest payment, but there will be no principal payments in 25 or 26. Thank you, Nicola. Boiling this down to what the tax impact is for the financing plan now that we have the final sale results, it is a $72 difference on a $300,000 home over the life of the note, based off of what you approved as the set sale planning document. And so you can see where your levy will go in 25 versus where it was in 24. You'll be facing a slight levy increase, which was anticipated. And then feathering in principal and interest payments along with existing debt dropping off through the 20-year note. And then I know that we've planned this in the past and wanted to show you specifically what the tax impact for the fire station borrowing was. And so this is a $58 reduction in the total impact on a $300,000 home over the life of the repayment of the specific portion associated with the fire department. And then just giving you a quick glance at where this falls in the city's borrowing capacity. After this issuance of the note, you'll be at 62% of your statutory limit, or I should say 43% of your statutory limit. You have an internal debt policy not to exceed 3.5% of your equalized value, of which this borrowing will put you at 62% of that internal debt limit. So you still have significant borrowing capacity, about $13.8 million still left in 2024. And as you retire debt into 2025, you'll gain about up to $17 million in residual borrowing capacity for any of the city's needs on a general obligation basis. So before you tonight is the resolution to award the sale of the note to Piper Sandler. Nicola has the bid documents that will need to be signed tonight and then returned to our office first thing in the morning so that we can get them to the underwriter. We plan to close on the note on October 30th. So that means the city will receive the funds on October 30th and can go ahead with the reimbursement of any 24 projects and move forward with the planning of the 2025 budget. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Hey, questions? Kayla, is this kind of what you expected in the number of bidders?
It's high for the last couple of sales that I've been directly involved in, which is very favorable to the city to receive 7 bids. That's quite a bit of bids. And especially with the spread was very close. If you look at the high bid was 3.79 and the low bid was 3.66. That's very tight. And so I think the strong credit rating of the city, along with the thoughtful planning of the internal debt policy is a very favorable thing on the market. And so we received more bids than I've seen for comparable sales in the past couple months. As well as we've seen interest rates come down since we've started this planning process. And so all of those are positive things overall for the city.
Okay, other questions? Then I would take a motion relative to the resolution to approve and award these promissory notes.
I'll make a motion. I move to adopt resolution 24-14 authorizing the issuance and sale of $5,975,000 general obligation promissory notes, series 2024B.
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Lynn to adopt resolution 2414.
Kayla, do we need to make it the exact amount?
It
5,900,000 now, I believe.
is, yes, 5,900,000.
And so that's because of the,
75,000.
yes, so.
Yes.
if-
So you
I'll
can,
move to adopt resolution 24-14 authorizing the issuance and sale of $5,900,000 in general obligation promissory notes, series 2024B.
Lynn?
Second it.
Okay, so we corrected the amount, 5,900,000. Colette will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
motion carries.
And thank you, Kayla, for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate you for letting me attend virtually.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, the
Bye-bye.
next item, we had an amended agenda sent, and so we have another action item listed, but we have no resolution, and I believe we won't have a resolution. So this was added, resolution 2415, authorizing the appeal of the Department of Revenue assessment of value of commercial property in the city. It was added last week when it could be added after our Board of Review met and had some discussions and issues relative to commercial real estate. So do you want to
That's-
take it over, Nicola?
That's correct. Yeah. Okay. Yes, so after, somewhat anxious process for the city going through another revaluation, you may recall that at the beginning of the revaluation, the commercial class of property was at about 72% of market value being determined by the state of Wisconsin, also known as equalized value. The state determines that value, and then they require municipalities to come within 10% of their value, either above or below market value. And so we knew that the commercial class was significantly out of compliance. And after the revaluation was completed, the accurate appraisal let us know that they had increased the commercial class as a whole by 48%. However, they received many submissions of income and expense reports from commercial property owners, particularly those that have rental facilities, and showing that the assessed values were not reflective of the income that they can earn on those properties.
And why did they, I mean, I hear you say they submitted an income and expense, but why would they do that?
The property owners would do that because there is a part of the assessor's manual that they have to follow includes making adjustments to the value of property but on the income basis. And the income basis is associated with how much income can be generated from a property that rents, space for living. And so having received many of these income and expense reports, assessors following the state law have to adjust their assessment for those properties, which they did. Part of that, you know, we went through the Board of Review process, and some of that was happening right before Board of Review. And after Board of Review had adjourned, the assessors explained to me and to Colette that based on having to make those adjustments according to the law, they were now just below 90% of the market value that's issued by the state of Wisconsin. So
Which would put us out of
so
compliance.
we would be out of compliance for a 5th year. And also would be looking at another revaluation next year, which is, you know, it's very troubling for the city to go through this. And additionally, what the assessor shared with me is that they felt that the equalized value that was determined by the state was not reflecting current trends in rental facilities in the city of Platteville. So the state actually determines a value for Platteville and for this kinds of property. And so there was some back and forth with the Department of Revenue. And city staff also met with the offices of our elected officials, Senator Markline's office and Representative Tranel's office, to see if we could get some help. Because essentially what we were looking at is an impossible goal. We're trying to meet equalized value determined by the state, but in order to comply with the law of assessment by the state, we were having to adjust down, and ultimately the commercial property it went from a 48% increase to just around a 30% increase. So there was a very large downward adjustment on commercial properties. As part of that process in meeting with our state legislature offices, we were pointed to the Tax Appeal Commission, and a municipality can appeal the equalized value determined by the state, but it's kind of a process, and it starts with council action, and it has to be submitted by the 15th of October. So we had a very short window of learning that we had this opportunity. We were hoping that between the assessors and the Department of Revenue, they could work it out. But in case they didn't, we brought forward this action item for the council to consider a resolution to approve submitting an appeal to the Wisconsin Tax Appeals Commission. Just this morning, we got word that after having submitted a lot of documentation, Accurate Appraisal was successful in having the state adjust its equalized value so that we will be in compliance for the commercial class. So we don't need to file an appeal. And not only that, but we understand that the Department of Revenue will take into consideration the information that it was provided this year when it is determining equalized value for commercial property in the city of Platteville next year. So we hope that we can stay in compliance. But now that we'll be in compliance this year, it kind of resets the clock, and we have at least 3 years of non-compliance before we would be in trouble again. So we've got some time now.
But we're not going to be in non-compliance. We're going to be in compliance. And so thank you to you, Nicola, and Clint. I was on that call on Friday too. And I am happy that Accurate followed through. It should be said that only those people who appealed their assessment, their commercial assessment, and provided documentation as was required. So it's not like there was carte blanche, any commercial property. I mean, the commercial property owner had to come in with documentation in order to have any
adjustment.
kind of adjustment.
That is correct.
If they didn't meet the timeline, if they didn't meet the burden of proof then those assessments were left as they were determined.
Yes,
So
the
just-
assessors are bound by the assessor manual and the law, so they can't just adjust without having that proof, as you said.
Okay, so we can move on. We don't have to do that.
I just have a real quick question. What Do you have the dollar amount, Nicola, of the difference between that 48% and the 30% of the ones that submitted paperwork?
I can derive that number. I don't have it in front of me, but I can get it for you.
I'm just curious.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that is that's all of our action items for tonight. So we'll move on to the information section of the budget or of the meeting, and we're going to hear the city manager budget. And my just to remind people, we will see this tonight, and then we have a meeting a week from tonight. That is a special meeting when we will review this in as much detail as anybody wants to review it. Is that correct?
Very well said. Yes, tonight is a very high level type of setting a narrative to the packets that you're going to receive. As in previous years, you'll receive the spreadsheets with all the many line items and numbers and such, and this is to try to put the narrative and the story to it. To kind of premise that as well, as we learned tonight, there's kind of several different variables that are still floating up in the air, including a good piece of good news that came to us at 4 o'clock this afternoon with the note sale. But obviously that was different than we were anticipating. So a lot of the numbers that we have in here tonight still need to reflect those adjustments. That being said, we'll get going right now. Our budget quote for this year took another one from John F. Kennedy, who over the last year I realized and came to the understanding that probably Ted Sorensen, his speechwriter, is the one that's coming up with these whiz-bang quotes. But a time to repair a roof is when the sun is shining, and that's going to try to capture the overall theme of what we're going to try to accomplish with the 2025 budget quote. In 2025 budget timeline, as you folks are familiar with this, we looked at this just the other week. We are into the month of October and chewing away. And October 15th then is when we're going to have our review session on the operation budget. In that meeting as well, we'll be talking about changes to the CIP plans and have an opportunity for that. Tonight's presentation is going to talk on these elements here. We'll talk on budget basics as a review of values, tenants, financial changes and capacities, budget proposals, process and requests, city manager review and recommendations, and impacts and summary. You'll probably remember these slides from previous years. This is just a very basic breakdown of our budget types of rules and such that we're trying to follow here. The city must create a budget where our revenues balance with our expenditures. The basic revenues that we're talking about is borrowing, state aid, fees, and taxes, and how those balance against such thing as operating expenses, CIPs, debt payments, and TID shortfalls as examples. There's other ones, of course, if you're talking about is revenues applying fund balances that can be applied forward. You might have litigations and expenditures. There's always outliers, but these are kind of the general tools and items that you're looking at when it's impacting your revenues and expenditures. Next, we'll kind of dive in deeper on, okay, what are these? And you folks kind of know these. Your operating budgets are the annual reoccurring day-to-days. Your CIPs are your one-time large investments with large equipment and infrastructure. Debt service, of course, is repayment on loans for those types of projects, for long-lasting projects. And then your TID districts is your captured increment that's going back into your infrastructure, other paybacks and benefits, and working with property developments. Operating revenue, again, to kind of put this in context, some of the rules that we want to follow with our operating revenues is we're looking for, if we're going to have continued we'll touch on that. One-time revenues should not be used to balance operating budgets is kind of our talking point that hit us, I think, probably during the ARPA years where we had an influx of monies, and it was kind of thought on, you know, we can't be investing one-time plugs into long-term problems. So really it comes down to increasing your revenues or decreasing your expenses when you're trying to solve your problems. To put it in a household budget type of a framework, if you have reoccurring personal expenses like utilities and clothing, trying to patch that with a one-time lottery winning or inheritance is probably not the right solution for long-term success. In debt service, as we talked about tonight, the numbers here reflect what Kayla kind of presented. The bottom line is that you have about 43% of legal capacity, or $29 million in capacity for borrowing. And according though to our policy, our ordinance, as Caleb pointed out, we're at about 62%, or about 14 million in capacity. When we're talking about CIP funding, we're looking at different elements that kind of went into that. As we talked about in our last meeting, we have transfer from general fund to extra reserves. We have carryover from previous years. We have short-term borrowing that's not typically in a sign of financial stress that we're trying to avoid. We have base reserves that may impact bond ratings. Essentially, if we're spending down, if we're incurring too much debt, it's going to become a challenge for investors to want to buy our bonds and notes at a competitive rate because they'd be potentially assuming more risk. And then we have concepts of long-term borrowing used for streets and some buildings. And again, this is kind of a review on concepts we covered last week with CIP, but just as a refresher. Our TID districts.
You went too far.
Too far. With TID districts, our TIFs, again, these are separate funds that we have set up and they are managed as separate accounts. We have oversight as well with our joint review board that looks over these, but we manage these again as individual funds in which we're trying to capture increment and put it into investments. And whether that's a city paying for it upfront or if we're using it as what we would refer to as a pay-go, where the developer is putting in the infrastructure and through a developer's agreement, we're reimbursing them for expenses. There's different mechanisms to maneuver through with that. Another concept, again, that we're going to talk about tonight as a refresher is your budget basics on your big driver. Did I go again? It's very touchy. It's a touchy little clicker here. I apologize. Thank you. The main drivers for the budget is kind of hitting your operating expenses is salaries, benefits, mandates, elections as they rotate through and paying for those in contracts. The main revenues that hit our budgets include our state aids, our hotel taxes, revenues related to new development again, if we're talking in regards to TIF, and other items include our debt services we've talked about in length, TID support and expenditure restraints. All concepts that kind of get touched on in conversations here tonight and as we move forward into our next meeting on October 15th. So with all that kind of on the upload, we'll move into the overall review of our values, tenets, financial changes, and capacities. This is a slide that we looked at again just a few weeks ago. We talked about our different values, and this is a slide that I'm looking to get a lot of conversation from you folks next year as we get into strategic planning process. But again, trying to highlight the two main gists of this slide is that we're trying to finance on needs at a responsible level and things that are desired as feasible. This is a slide again that we looked at just a few weeks ago, but it is refined and it's kind of right now broken into two different categories. We have kind of, when we're talking about tenets of our finances, we've got it broken into the different elements of thou shalts, and that's kind of your statutes and abiding by levy limits that are imposed by the state, less our exemptions to that formula. We also have a statute that says we meet maintenance of effort requirements for supplemental shared revenue, which we'll talk about on our next slide. We have an ordinance in place that says we're going to maintain less than 3.5 for our total equalized value and debt. We have administrative policies that says maintain undesignated general fund balance of 20% of the general fund budget. And we have an ordinance 3.42, which limits the council's authority to make expenditures. Any type of a building over $1 million, the ordinance would call for an advisory referendum question to get feedback from the community. Of course, this can be waived by vote of the council, but it is out there. Council goals that we've identified right now is to meet eligibility for expenditure restraint revenues. We have Roundtree Branch Trail agreements in place that says that stream break stabilization every 2 years as desired. We have a seal coat element in there that says every 5 years, but that's in the context that the PCA would offer $2,500 annually for that agreement. We've got CIP borrowing note not to exceed the retired principal in previous year. That is a practice that we've operated with and historically. as well as the city contributing $15,000 for airport CIP. And then we have CIP borrowing is predominantly for street reconstruction, and then CIP levy for equipment. Although some of these have, we've bent and maneuvered around a little bit as, again, more of practices than rules. But I'd like you folks to take a good look at this slide, because this is kind of, as we go into next year, kind of that baseline policy document of if we want to adjust things in future forecasts on a tool for you folks to say, these are the thou shalts, Clinton staff that we're going to follow with. And these are kind of the loose guidelines that we would like to see as we begin building future budgets. Okay, continuing to upload here now. This is our an expanded kind of a definition and explanation of maintenance of effort. So with the supplemental shared revenue that came down to us from the state last year, it was about a little over 500, maybe 500,000, almost close to 600,000, somewhere in there. These are the rules that kind of go along with showing maintenance of effort. So with Act 12, it requires municipalities to provide reports essentially. If we are in non-compliance, the penalty could be 15% of your shared revenue. Certification requirements for law enforcement does not apply to us as we're less than 20,000, but we do have to comply with fire and EMS, and the categories that are established for showing maintenance of effort impact our expenditures, not including capital expenditures, the number of full-time employees or FTE equivalents that we have in firefighters and EMS, training and license of maintenance and firefighters and EMS personnel in response to call times. Southwest Health certifies our report for EMS, and then our own fire department and Chief Simmons working with Nicola do the certification for our fire department.
Question, did we get a copy of the certification that Southwest Health filed?
Yes, we file it. They provide it to us and then we are required to file it.
Okay, based on the information that came to us at 4 o'clock, again, with the terrific news with a note sale, this slide here tonight. Oh, no, hold on a second. I'm out of order again here. I went ahead too many. This is the general process that we went through, and it matches kind of what we did with CIP, where the city manager released the 2025 budget guidance out to directors. Directors of administration released the operational worksheets out to directors. Directors completed their worksheets. The directors then met with the or submitted the sheets for compile or to the director of administration to compile. There was a presentation to myself and Nicola. We reviewed. The notifications were given out to director. Recommendation is now given here tonight to Common Council in the 15th, and then looking for your guidance. Some of the elements that went out with the budget proposals, the initial guidance was review elements, as we talked about, the swimming pool failure, housing development funds, again, the monies that came down to us from the Claire properties. We also had police sergeant wages that we adjusted for early in 2024 and identified those. Some of the anticipated changes with 2025 is continued inflationary pressures, insurance costs, cost of living increases. Guidance was given out to directors to proceed with 3% wage increase for employees, of which we'll talk about more in depth here tonight. And then there was some specific guidance given out to departments. And the document as itself is kind of yet in development as we try to make that a living reoccurring document that is presented to you folks prior to the budget so that you have an understanding of what the city manager next year is directing departments to accomplish based on hopefully your guidance with the tenants document. Overall, where we arrived at, and again, based on our good news with the bond sale, these numbers have already changed, but we arrived at a general fund request from departments, which was about $3,601,525. Now, at the time then too, you can see our debt service number of 1.6 and our debt service specifically for the fire station at about 150,000, taking into account that those are impacts on interest only, as the debt was structured where principals would not impact until later years. We had capital improvement fund direct from levy of 400,000 and a Broski Center fund of 46,000 for that total of roughly 5.8. At the time, this number accounted for about a 16% increase in total levy impact. And it was our goal to try to then reduce this down to a more incremental impact of 5 to 10%. Again, at the time, the numbers of what we received here tonight changed these by roughly perhaps $200,000. So in working through our department budgets, which you will see, and you're going to see when they're presented, it's going to have a request column and then city manager column showing the changes in these line items. These are the broad strokes or broad picture of what was directed for the different budgets for the different functions. Am I on the right
Backward.
one here? There we go. So the city manager review and recommendations for administration in the city manager budgets, and this is going to include the council budget, the administration budget, the city clerk budget, finance budget, information technology budget, the debt service budget, the ambulance and city manager budgets, as well as communications, HR, and ARPA. When it comes to it's a bunch of different sheets and such, but overall, the adjustments that were made, we adjusted the city manager's budget was built with a contingency fund to try to capture unanticipated expenses in 2025. That was reduced down with the anticipation of making a citywide contingency fund. As we'll go through here, several of our departments identifying concerns, as we talked about with CIP, of trying to capture a risk with building failure or equipment failure. We consolidated all that risk with a CIP type of a contingency fund. So in the same line, we reduced this operating budget to reflect that. There was health insurance reductions that were also put in place, which we'll touch on with what happened with our health insurance. We also had revenue increases with shared revenues with the state, municipal service payments, personal property aid, and local levy were all adjusted as a mark up. The budget itself reflects reduced elections in 2025. This year is a heavier year. So next year we should have less expenses with less elections. We also, though, increased expenses with auditing. As we went through tonight, our auditor expenses prices went up, so we adjusted for that. And then we're also incorporating the funding for maintenance software in this budget. As talked about, we're trying to get our arms around our many different infrastructure and equipment pieces and trying to be able to monitor those as well as anticipate expenses. We also had an increase in ambulance service and insurance costs. And Nicola, I think our ambulance service is coming in at a 160% increase. It's some very big number that we'll talk about in depth on the 15th. And again, though, that number is going to impact our added ambulance service fees as outside of our levy, but we'll talk on the details on October 15th. With it as well, we had insurance costs, cost of our property liabilities as the cost goes up for building supplies and replacing cars. We're seeing more and more increases with our insurance. And overall, though, with this budget for these different departments, we're able to maintain functions, maintain current staff, but we do have limited ability to balance project management and still satisfying the different many reports that are requested at higher levels and from other types of departments. The general themes that you're going to see with the police department budget. So police changes again as we had health insurance to reflect our renewal negotiations, which we'll talk in depth at the end of the departments. We had my recommendations and adjustments to the police department includes then shaving of operational expenditure lines and reduction of outlay. And again, some of this is covered with the city contingency fund as put into CIP. There's also adjustments of several revenue lines reflecting trends through 2024. And I'll say it now, this is not to try to meet quota with parking tickets and other types of infractions and offenses. It's capturing trend data from previous year. In 2024 as well, let me touch on this first. What the impacts of this budget are for Doug and for the department is it maintains current functions and staffing. And concerns that remain, though, is that we're operating with 20 officers versus 21 officers, which is authorized by position, but is not funded right now. In balance with that, though, in the 2024 budget this year, we did authorize more expenditures for overtime, which is helping, but trying to keep an eye on that, especially when we have conversations of helping cover extra community events where we have to have more officers on duty. That impacts, again, our running with one less officer, as well as if we have extended types of leaves. Concerns are also with compression and risk on some of the flat operational expenses, and having Doug shave these from the budget. Again, we'd run risks if we can continue to maintain at those levels with the factors of increased costs. Moving on to the fire department. The changes that were made to Ryan's budgets include the health insurance negotiations to reflect the rates. And there is also a slight increase to revenues as part of townships matching the increase of coverage and costs for expenditures. The impacts on this budget is we're anticipating that we're still going to be able to currently continue current functions and staffing. The budget will reflect WRS protected classification for the fire inspector position, which we'll talk on in a few more slides. And it does reflect continued increase again in vehicle insurance. Ryan has I think the biggest and fanciest and most expensive pieces of equipment and trucks, and the insurance then also goes up on those. It is important, though, also to reflect on that this budget is funding 2 full-time positions, and it works with a lot of volunteer hours. And I think it's important to not lose sight of that. We will maintain, of course, our maintenance of effort in having 2 full-time staff on there, but we are able to do a lot of things based on volunteer hours when it comes to our fire protection. Public Works budgets, there are a lot of them that you're going to see. You'll see the building service budget, the streets administration, street maintenance, highway, street lights, storm and sewer, waste, recycling, cemeteries, and weeds. The overall big adjustments to this included reallocation of professional services for GIS support, allocating some of that towards water and sewer. So Joe's budgets and Howard's budgets and had bits and pieces of where GIS was going for professional services. We've taken a lot out of Joe's budget, added some of that into streets and some into water and sewer to reflect usage. And you'll see those changes in the documents. We also shaved from operational expensive lines for reductions in outlay, assuming some risks. Again, as an example, we shaved salt based on our billback usage. For the last few years, we've been lucky with our winters and where we've arrived at. So we've kind of flattened that and kept it down underneath the premise that if we have to go on an overage to still get it, that we would do it, but trying to free up capacity for other types of projects. Changes in health insurance will also be reflected in these budgets. The overall impacts as it maintains current functions and staffing for Howard. We're assuming risk on these on flat equipment and supply appropriations. And also this would not account for an aging garage door at the shop that is anticipated. Well, in the garage itself, and I know that there's anticipation of a door. And we have concerns yet with remaining deferred CIP items, including a very long list of roads. And as we talked about, streets garage, well 3, the water buildings, amongst some others. The library budget, main changes included then health insurance to reflect our negotiations, which you'll see. The budget does not include funding support for proposed staff changes, which we'll talk about. The main impacts to Jesse in the library is that we're hoping to maintain current functions and staffing, but there's remaining concerns yet for turnover and recruitment. There's concerns on maintaining service hours, and there's also consideration of programming and hours change, potentially a discussion that Jesse plans on having with our boards as we continue moving forward. Challenges, as we've talked about, is trying to maintain 2 floors with staffing at the desk, and maintaining program support is a challenge, especially with many of those positions being at halftime capacity. That long-term retention in those positions is unique and poses a burden. At the museum, we're anticipating again changes in health insurance and then changes in revenue to reflect the Friends of the Museum's coverage of the combined collection management and education specialist position. This was an addition that happened coming into this year where we took 2 half-time positions and combined them in a full-time, and the Friends came to the rescue to pay for the added benefits then that go with merging those two. The impacts on this is we're hoping to maintain current staffing functions, continued concerns though with maintenance services, display rotations and collection maintenance. And then also engaging in long-term strategic planning to refine the mission and objectives of which I think we're arriving at a 90% solution and look forward to rolling that out here and seeing how it impacts with our CIP and our operations moving forward. Large strokes on the Parks and Recs budget that you're going to see, and this includes several different budgets. It's going to be your Parks, Recreation, Administration, Programs, Aquatic Center, Forestry, the Senior Center, and the Broski Center. We've adjusted several lineups reflecting trends through 2024 on revenues with programming, trying to hope that some of the ones that have become popular stay popular. We've also moved expenses of ActiveNet software to programs and then also shared with Broski Center. So ActiveNet is the scheduling software that Parks uses, and it fell into, I think, contracted expenses and data expenses are shared. So we moved them into those two. We also had reduced professional services to reflect Smith Park bathroom maintenance and May mowing as employed functions. And that was in a contracted service budget. The idea there was to try to do that through a contract. We're going to keep it as an employed function and then free up those funds then for other types of purposes. And then reduced swimming expenditures. We went into this last year with a very robust staff and trying to have full capacity at our outdoor pool. 2 weeks, of course, a week before we opened, pool failed and we moved everything to a UWP system pool. The lesson we learned there was a lesson that's kind of been learned by UWP as well, is that our programming did successful with our lessons. We had a lot of participation there. Open swims hours did not do well. Also then keep in mind is that we did a full refund for our folks that had seasonal passes. We don't anticipate having seasonal pass revenues going into this next year. So that being said, the budget that's coming forward, it reduces the request of levy support from 146,000 down to 90,000 for a package of predominantly swim lessons. And that's again kind of in context of lost revenue and what we've seen for participation. We plan on having ongoing conversations yet with UWP leadership and seeing what that's going to look like as we approach the 2025 season. But again, with it too, is it's right sizing the staff then to meet a swim program base and less of an open swim that we had at our larger facility. We plan on maintaining our current staffing functions and staffing, and then there are going to be other changes that you'll see in regards to the programming as some programs are becoming more popular and we have more participation and some are not as popular as they once were. Okay, one more with community development here. So this is going to include planning, building inspection, Southwest CAP program, redevelopment authority, affordable housing program, neighborhood investment grant for family advocates, and then the community development investment grant for the RFK Armory are the budgets that you will see. We had reductions in relocation of professional services for GIS, as we mentioned with Howard's budget, in combining those and reallocating those towards more heavily towards streets and water and sewer. And then we also moved an IT item over to an IT budget versus impacting his office supplies. The impacts is we're hoping to maintain functions and staffing. We still have limited capacity regarding our ordinance enforcement, and that is maintained as a half-time, part-time position. We also have limited capacity for responding to permit requests. And then we also have administrative obligations accompanying grant opportunities that we would anticipate with this budget. Health insurance. Okay, so we're through the departments. So those are kind of the broad strokes on what you're going to see with the departmental budgets when they come to you. We'll get into the details when we hit October 15th. Now, to talk in details on things that kind of impacted everybody then, health insurance. So at the end of the second quarter, we were looking at about 113 medical loss ratio. And what that means is that we're trending at being about 13% over our premiums going in, which is not good because that means we're not paying in as much as claims that are coming out on top of employee deductibles and such. So we were anticipating a very big number that was going to come back to us with this budget. We optimistically crafted the initial budgets at a 12% health insurance costs. And then we unleashed Chad and our brokers on our health insurance carrier, UW Quartz, to work with them on arriving at a better number for us. So they were able to negotiate our current plan at an 8.9% renewal to our existing plan, which is still a big number. But in comparison to what's happening with other counties around us, it was almost a sigh of relief to do that. So the budget right now is built with a recommendation on moving forward at an 8.9 renewal on the existing plan, with fair warning given to departments and to our employees that next year we might have to pull one of two different types of tools in trying to manage our health insurance costs, including consideration potentially for plan adjustment and design, whether that's premium share or deductibles or medications. We plan on kind of putting everything on the table again to try to help manage cost increase. The other option that may be out there is to change providers. Another opportunity for us is to look at potentially like a Dean plan or something of that nature that may be to buy our business, but potentially to buy our business and give us a deal and reduction in moving over to a different plan. That comes with some burdens on administration and changing plans. It comes with some burdens on employees on changing, getting new cards. The major burden, of course, felt by changing our provider or plan carrier from a Quartz to a Dean is going to be for folks with more advanced care. Southwest Health carries both Quartz and Dean, so most of our small visits and annual checkups and all those types of things and most surgeries and such would still be able to go through a Southwest Health. But if you have specialty type of care for chronic types of conditions and things of that nature, it's going to change where our employees would seek that type of care. Other impacts, as we talked about, is our vehicle insurance for our fleet management. As costs go up, our insurance continue to go up. We continue to try to scrutinize that on trying to say what is the best risk and the reward here, and to continue working with our brokers on that. TRICARE has been excellent, and EMS has been excellent on trying to help us manage those types of solutions. Another conversation that we'll continue to have when we talk about our fleet is going to be that ownership of our vehicles versus leasing of our vehicles. And it's a challenge. We have many vehicles right now in a lease type of a program. At the inception of that program, as we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, it was advantageous. It was seen as advantageous because there's a gap in which governments can receive a vehicle. There's a government rate, which is different from a different or a general retail rate. And you were almost able to like buy that vehicle, use it for a year or two, and then sell it for a market rate, take that equity and invest it on a new vehicle and, you know, almost come out kind of an even Steven. Well, that has changed now when we don't have a government rate with a huge kind of a gap. So it's kind of using vehicles at a lease rate. There are advantages is that we do have reduced routine types of maintenance on those vehicles, as well as a fleet of reliable vehicles in which we're not worried about maintenance issues. But we're trying to still gauge on what's a good long-term solution. And it might not be the same for every type of a vehicle. Certainly Doug's use of a vehicle is different than folks that are working for Howard at Park or at Streets. It's different from Bob at Park. So as we manage are we going to own it or are we going to lease it? It's going to be probably dependent on each vehicle. Okay. See, I'm losing some people here. A lot of glazed look.
Wages and salaries.
Let's get to wages and salaries. This is a much more emotionally charged one here. We might even have something thrown at me by the end of this one. So in setting a 3% cost of living increase in the guidance, it's kind of based on some numbers that we were able to pull. The main numbers that you're looking in here is the Bureau of Labor statistic on the top. and the Wisconsin Employee Relations Commission numbers on the bottom. To make it a little bit more geekier, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they typically don't come out on theirs until like the month after you've arrived at it. And the Wisconsin Employee Relation Commission actually projects theirs several months out in advance. The point and premise I'd like you to take a look at, though, is kind of if you slide all the way over to the right column. You're looking at Bureau of Labor Statistics over the last years of 2018 to 2015, suggesting that there's been about a 25% total increase. And that relates roughly to what Wisconsin is saying at a 24.91% increase. Our increases over those years have been at 22%, and we identified that. In 2023, the City Council, the city did a study through Carlson Detman, and we've tried to address that. The number 3% that you're seeing there for 2025 is in between a 2.5 and a 3.3, and we would still be allowing for step progression increases in that as well. So a 3% to me feels appropriate on perhaps not losing ground and reflects well with what we're seeing for cost of living adjustments. I will make a note, though, that WPPA collective bargaining agreement that we arrived at was a 5.43. And so going into 2025, they would be 1% higher than our general employees, which is outside of our norm. But again, if in looking at where we're at this year and last year with giving the general employees a 7% increase, it feels like we're being fair and we're being financially responsible to our taxpayers as well. Any questions or anybody want to? Okay. Moving in then to requests for positions. These were the positions that were requested coming into this budget year, and the benefit of the position and the financial impacts. And then this slide shows what has been authorized and approved by the city manager, authorizing the fire inspector to be reclassified under WRS as a protected class, which comes at an expense of $4,668, and allowing Public Works essentially to merge their classifications on street workers from a 1 and a 2 to just a street worker position, that it's going to allow a flexibility then for management to take multiple employees and have them interchange for the same type of a job. So all of this said and done, we arrive at a slide that looks like this, in which my numbers are again very skewed. But in drawing your attention to the bottom right, we went from a 16% to a 7.9%, and that includes your fire facility debt service. So from a 16% to a 7.9% with your fire facility debt service, or roughly a 19 or a 5 or 4.9% increase in operations without that fire facility a debt service increase. This number is going to change based on information tonight. This is going to drop by potentially $200,000 depending on the final where the dust settles. This puts our number potentially then at, not to commit to it, but perhaps more of a 5%, 5.5%, potentially lower for an overall levy impact with the fire facility debt service. And I would say that, though, premised on the fact that because we have our, and what was it called again? It's our
Offering premium on the debt.
reoffering premium that's going to pay our interest on that debt in 2025. We don't have to levy that. But we do have to keep in mind, though, that that is still setting our ceiling higher on our debt service levy. So when we hit 2026, we're going to experience some of that. And then in 2027, we're going to experience all that against our levy. But that's, that's less desirable. But the good news is on the front end, though, is that we're going to save money for our taxpayers. The next slides here would have been wicked awesome. But now our numbers are kind of skewed again with some of our borrowing.
You went 2 again.
Did I go 2 again? The overall take that you can probably see from these is that it is a very incremental budget in nature. A lot of the pieces of the pie are staying the same type of a size when it's looking at your general fund revenues and your expenditures. You'll see some changes in the realm of % or so, but for the most part, it's staying relatively the same. So the overall impacts in the budgets or the impacts in summary that you're going to see in the budgets as they come forward is going to be the proposed 2025 budget operates, and these numbers are changed in a 4.9% with a 7.9. Hopefully that's more in the range of potentially around a 5% increase. In the proposed 2025 budget operates of what would look like, again, potentially a 10.8% estimated decrease in mill rate. Now, this number of 10.8% decrease in mill rate is still hinged on these two variables. Again, the note sale is going to impact our debt service levy, so that's going to change that number. And we have not arrived at a finalized value yet for our formula on our mill rate for the assessed value. So that's going to change. Regardless, though, because of the reevaluation and our property values going up and our levy not going at the same, the same proportional rate, it's going to be a decreased mill rate. Doesn't mean that there's not more tax dollars that have to be paid by the community as a whole. It just means that the mill rate based on the assessed value is going to be lower. Consider again too, in the last 2 years, we've tried to kind of toe the line on total tax increase. This year, it's fair to say that we have to kind of probably circle back around to an understanding that as expenses go up, cost of doing business is going up. And then as we approach our conversations on the 15th, 60,000, maybe that's a bit high, represents about 1%. So if we want to start making changes to a budget, we'd like to see things incorporated or changed. About $60,000 of added expenditures without an offset equals about 1%. The next slide will have some changes again, but the overall point of this slide is an understanding that we have one things that will not is that we've got 400,000 in levy support for expenditures to be incorporated outside of debt funds. So we're going to put 400,000 levy dollars directly into CIP funding, and that's going to be $100,000 more than we did in 2024. And that's for vehicle replacement, equipment replacement, building repairs, park improvements, and sidewalk repairs. Again, the reason that we're trying to put levy flux directly into it versus putting everything in debt service is so that we still maintain that ceiling and capacity in case we have to do something very big, or if something very big breaks, it gives us, gives us room to respond. The next part of it with our borrowing at the bottom, again, roughly $1.3 million for street reconstruction annually. We had roughly 1.345 come off of our budget last year, a retired principal, and we're anticipating about 1.7 that's going onto it. So the big narrative, what does it all do? What does it all mean? What our budget does is it maintains most city services, functions, and staffing levels. We're not anticipating cutting any positions, and we have just the small adjustments with the 2 positions that were mentioned here tonight. It incorporates a fiscally feasible 5-year CIP plan with assumed risk. It maintains a competitive compensation policy and supports recruitment, retention, and quality of services. It provides funding to incorporate maintenance tracking system, and it reintroduces increases in levy burdens after relatively flat increases in 2023 and 2024. What it does not do is it does not include funding to explore future pool replacement. It does have in there we put the $200,000 in place for doing exploration on what it's going to look like, but we do not have funding secured for an actual replacement. It does not fund all the requested CIP needs brought forward. As mentioned, a lot of different streets and water projects and other projects that our departments have, so we still have risk hanging out there. It does not eliminate the challenges of managing expectations with the resources provided, or growing new services without reduction of other existing services, and maintaining functions when facing turnover remains a challenge. With this budget also, we've had DOT support, which has helped us with our streets in 2024, but we're still lacking that long-term kind of plan on what we want our life cycle to be and how we're going to achieve it. This plan has 4.4 miles in 2025, again with DOT help. of our 53.18 miles total center line. This plan has a life cycle of roughly 120.8-year replacement. All these things being said, you will receive the full worksheets between now and October 15th for discussion. And that evening, we'll be kind of going budget by budget and kind of presenting again with a little bit more detail on what the different line items change and what it can do and what it can't do. Staff will be present at that meeting to talk in more detail as questions come up. And with it too, after we get through operations, if there's appetite, we can circle back around to changes in CIP and further recommendations that you folks might have as we put together then a final budget packet for November. So all very high, very dry, and I apologize that some of the numbers are still very fluffy based on some variables with revaluation. And you know, if that's what it takes, though, is you get good news that we're going to save, you know, $200,000 on a debt service thing, then I guess we'll deal with the inconvenience of reshaping the numbers if we can lighten the burden by that. Any questions on the big item kind of presentation or expectations as we go into October 15th?
And note that that meeting is at 5, not 6.
I just have a question. Say that full worksheets would be provided. Are we going to get them early so that we have? At the October 15th
We
meeting.
will get them in advance of October 15th. I can't be absolutely sure when. We've had some extra stuff come up lately that we've been dealing with, so we'll.
But this
get them to
week?
you.
This week, so we have them for the weekend?
Hopefully, yes.
You can just.
And will those be printouts?
Yes. Well, however you want them. We usually send them hard copy to those that prefer hard copy and electronically to those that prefer electronically.
Which do you get?
I would like a hard copy of this. I don't have a printer that can do that.
Yeah, of this, I would like a hard copy too. You probably, in order to see it.
Okay, we'll send out hard copies to everybody just to be on the safe side.
Thank you.
Got a hard copy on Friday.
We'll do our best. Full disclosure, my mother-in-law is at end of life and I may need to leave. But we'll do our best.
Thank you.
Well, that was a
Right.
lot.
5 PM, are we gonna have food?
5 PM, are we gonna have food?
Well, I'm withdrawing that.
I don't know. Are we having food?
We can arrange
True.
some sandwiches.
I'm not asking for it, I'm just curious.
I'm going to be using your council budget though, Ken, so.
That's for sure.
Okay, probably at least some snacks.
You may not provide the right food.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is a resolution affirming legacy naming of the Keith Terrell Complex and Flint.
Thank you, Madam President. So we received concerns from a previous Platteville resident regarding the Terrell Sports Complex and signage. Through multiple discussions, we were educated on the inception of the fields, the dedication and naming of the field and complex, and the history of Keith Terrell, the original signage at Legion Park. In efforts to maintain or to help memorialize the city's desire of naming the complex in the field, it is recommended that the Common Council affirm their intentions by resolution. This resolution will be kept on file to ensure future staff are aware of the city's intentions as established through administrative policy. Regarding concerns for the signage, it is the previous Platteville residents' desire to see the city replace the original sign located near the Legion Park parking lot entrance off Pitt Street. The original sign was removed at some point and replaced with the smaller sign on the Legion Park Pavilion. The disposition of the original sign is unknown. The city has taken action to reprint the current sign located at Legion Field Pavilion to commemorate Keith Terrell Complex and correct the spelling error. The city has not replaced the original sign erected in May of 2000. It is recommended that the current commemorative sign remain, and we refrain from replicating the original sign near Pitt Street. The existing sign commemorates Keith and the complex in a spot of visibility for attendees to the complex. Legion Park is associated with many commemorative names, including Legion Field, Terrell Complex, Woodward Field, Hill Field, Chamberlain Field, Abbing Field, Broski Center, Sanders Shrine Pickleball Complex, Legion Field Courts, etc. Our effort is to maintain a balance of these memorial structures and preservation of Legion Park as a navigable destination for our visitors. This all kind of starts with, there's a letter on your desk that you'll see from Lynette, which kind of is where the concern arrived from. So if you flip through your packet, you'll see a sign. The second page there, it shows the original sign for Keith Terrell with the sport complex. This sign fell into disarray some years back. In working with Mr. Peters, the previous Parks Director, a sign was erected on the concession stand that you'll see as a replacement sign there. And in trying to solve many of problems, the first problem we arrived at is we had no idea when and how the fields were named. It looks like the city was in full support based on some documentation of we had like an agenda on the day's event of commemorating Keith. And we had folks from the city that were there, and it believes that the Parks Director at the time was very adamant on putting everything together. But we were at kind of a loss on understanding, when and what point in time that the city kind of officially named these types of fields. So a resolution tonight is to try to solve that problem and memorialize it so that we have the city council saying, yes, this is the Keith Terrell complex, and yes, these are the names of the fields associated with it. And yes, they'll be named this until the points of time of when it's no longer used for its purpose, or if we have a replacing purpose, or the council determines that there's an opportunity to change it to advance the overall mission of Legion Field. The sign itself becomes kind of a separate issue, and the action tonight is just requesting for the resolution to be passed to officially kind of recognize those names of the field. But as an opportunity to discuss on it, I've informed Lynette that it's my recommendation that we continue with the sign that is placed on the concession stand, for the sake that we do have a lot of signs that are going on out there. I don't mean to show disrespect to the legacy of Keith Terrell by any means, but it does feel like the sign emplacement is visible and it commemorates that complex as Keith. And it does kind of help then preserve the overall image and location for folks that are coming to Platteville. If you're punching in Legion Field, we know where Legion Field is versus many of the other names that are associated with it. So that is kind of what it's drafted up for you to consider at the next meeting. Be looking for action on the resolution to confirm it, but did tee it up tonight where if you wanted to have further discussion on sign replacement, we could also have that. But we do have a remedy that is in place that does commemorate Keith Terrell out there at Legion Field or Legion Park. Madam President.
Questions, comments?
Only comment I guess I have with it is every generation seems to have its hero, and people must expect over time for some of these things to change. I think we saw a lot of them being torn down in 2019 and 20. So at least that didn't happen.
I want to just make a comment though, that I sort of remember that sign being there. I don't know any of the specific background, but I don't recall ever. Everybody calls it Legion Field or Legion Park, not the Keith. So forward to make this decision, it's sort of.
Well, we're going to keep the name Keith Terrell Sports Complex, which would then include Abbing Field, Chamberlain Field, Woodward Field, and some other.
I'm just
field.
saying that as a marker, if we would actually be shifting and calling it something other than Legion Field.
So there's many names out there. I'm sure Bob probably has a list longer than I do, but I know that there's signs that say Legion Park and the pavilion says Legion Field. And then we've got Woodward Field and Hill Field and Chamberlain Field and Abbing Field. And then we have a sports complex, and then we have a Broski Center off to the side of that. And then we've got our Trine, our Sanders Trine Pickleball Complex. And then we've got Legion Field Courts where we throw horseshoes. And those are all good things. I'm not trying to down any of them. But yes, like you're saying, when we have folks coming from out of town, it would be nice to still have a navigable point of it's going to be at Legion Park. We have these other very nice memorialized amenities there, but it's at Legion Park. With that being said too, so we have added language in the resolution, which kind of tries to capture some of the same sentiments of our donation policy, which would say that such names shall be recognized until the earliest of the following events. Complex or fields no longer serve their intended purpose. B, repairs or improvements significantly alter or replace existing structures. C, existing structures are removed from Legion Field. Or D, the Common Council so determines that opportunities have come to fruition in which renaming of the complex and fields further advances the overall mission of Legion Park. So to your point, Todd, of things do change, and not to forget the folks that we've built on the bases that they've built for us, and we stand on their shoulders. But there might be future opportunities and future generations that have different purposes, different heroes, different folks that come and help us support the overall mission of the Parks and Parks Department.
Excuse me, Barb, can I say something?
Sure.
In our maps and everything, we have it labeled as Legion Field.
I assume that the park up there is labeled Legion Park.
Or Legion. So can we, just throwing this out, can we incorporate saying Legion Park, including the major?
It could be an option for the future when we replace signage out on the street front. If we have Legion Park, including like these other amenities, almost like you'd see it, say a mall downtown or something like that, where you're saying all these features are here.
Just a comment.
Yeah, your reprinted original sign might address that. Right now, it just says founder of the Cardinals, dedication to baseball, help to shape. You might say the baseball and softball fields at Legion Park instead of help to shape Legion Park. I think you could look at some of the wording on your signage there, unless it's already made.
Printed and hung, if I
Yeah.
recall.
I think maybe we
It
need
is
to
printed and
think about those things before we, think about the longer term. Okay, this will come for action at our next meeting. We will not have a closed session tonight because your council president did not do her homework. So I am passing out the evaluations for the city manager tonight. At least one person has passed theirs back to me. So yeah, I know some people are, so you can pass that one to Tom. Yeah, do you have one?
Want two?
You finished? Oh, you printed, it. Okay.
I don't need one. I did
Yeah.
the assignment already.
He did his assignment. So we will not have a closed session. So I will, and we'll do this probably, if you get these back to me, then I'll compile them for our meeting on the 22nd of October. So at this point, then I would take a motion to adjourn.
Just one comment. Wanted to thank the city manager and all the staff for their preparation for the city budget and making it so clear and concise and easy to follow. It's appreciated.
Agree.
I agree.
Yes.
Barb, when do you want these?
I want those but no later than next week at the budget meeting at 5 o'clock on October 15th. That should give me plenty of time to compile them before October 22nd. Okay,
I have a motion.
good.
A motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Wow.
Ooh.
Pick a second. You want to call, yes or no's, Colette? Sound like we had so many say yes, try to second that should do it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
thank you.